The rain poured like vengeance from the heavens that night, washing away the last traces of Eli's once golden world. The marble floors of the Crestfall mansion echoed with hurried footsteps, voices of panic, and the sound of papers scattering like broken dreams. The company his father had built, the empire that had defined the name Crestfall, was gone, taken over, stolen, and the man responsible stood at the center of it all, calm and unbothered, like a king surveying the ruins he'd created. Damien Voss, the alpha who had risen from nothing and crushed everyone who had ever looked down on him. His dark suit clung to his tall frame, raindrops glinting on his shoulders like shards of glass. His gaze, cold and sharp as a blade, found Eli across the chaos. "Your family's reign ends tonight," he said quietly, but his voice carried like thunder. Eli's breath hitched. His heart was breaking, his pride burning. "You think this makes you powerful? You destroyed innocent people, my family," he spat, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this." Damien took a step closer, his boots echoing against the polished floor. "No," he replied, his tone like ice. "I've waited years for this. Your father ruined my family. I'm only giving him what he deserves." Eli's body trembled, part rage, part helplessness. The scent of Damien's dominance filled the air, thick and intoxicating. He hated it. He hated him, but his Omega instincts betrayed him. Heart pounding too fast, breath catching when Damien's eyes darkened with something he couldn't name. Anger, maybe desire, maybe both. "Get out," Eli whispered, though his voice wavered. "You've already taken everything. Just leave." But Damien didn't move. He stepped closer until Eli could feel the warmth radiating from his chest, smell the faint spice of his scent beneath the rain and smoke. "No," Damien said softly, dangerously. "I'm not done with you yet, Crestfall." Something in the air snapped. Maybe it was hatred. Maybe it was the unbearable tension that had been building since the first moment they met. The storm outside roared louder, lightning flashing across the windows. Damien's hand caught Eli's wrist, pulling him closer. Eli tried to shove him away, but his strength was no match for an alpha's grip. Their eyes met, fury and pain colliding. "You think you've won?" Eli hissed, his lips trembling. "You're just proving you're no better than the monsters you hate." For a moment, Damien's gaze flickered. Something raw flashed there, something almost human, but it was gone as quickly as it came. "Maybe I am," he muttered, voice low, "but you'll remember who took everything from you." And then, in a moment of anger, confusion, and something neither of them could explain, their lips crashed together. Not out of affection, but desperation. It was violent, chaotic, filled with hate and heat. The world outside blurred, thunder drowning out Eli's gasp as Damien's control finally snapped. When the storm ended, silence fell like ash. Eli sat on the floor, trembling, eyes filled with disbelief and tears. Damien stood there, breathing hard, horror dawning slowly on his face. What had he done? He turned away, fists clenched, voice breaking for the first time. Forget this ever happened. But Eli knew nothing about this night could ever be forgotten, because this was the night his world was destroyed, and the night destiny bound him to the man he hated most. Morning came without mercy. Pale light crept through the torn curtains, spilling across the floor where fragments of shattered glass glimmered like the remains of a broken life. Eli stirred, his body heavy, his head aching, and then the scent hit him, sharp, possessive, overwhelming. Damien's scent. His breath hitched violently. His skin burned where teeth had once grazed, where lips had pressed too hard, where his body had betrayed him. He sat up with a gasp, clutching at his neck, and that's when he felt it. Faint sting. A mark. His mark. "No," he whispered, shaking his head, as tears welled up in his eyes. "No, no, no." He stumbled toward the mirror, his reflection blurring through the tears. There it was, faint but undeniable, the dark bruise at the base of his neck, shaped like an alpha's claim. His heart dropped into a cold void. In one night, He had gone from being the heir of the Crestfall name to nothing more than the claimed omega of his family's greatest enemy. His body trembled. He wanted to scream, to scrub the scent off until his skin bled, to erase the memory of Damien's touch. But no matter how hard he washed, no matter how much water he poured over himself, that scent clung to him, deep, invasive, unrelenting. It was inside him, a cruel reminder of everything he'd lost. Outside, reporters shouted questions about the Crestfall downfall, but their words felt distant. Eli locked himself inside his room, curled up against the wall, arms wrapped around himself like a shield. The mark pulsed faintly, a physical memory of the man who had ruined him. Across town, Damien sat alone in his office, the same ruthless alpha everyone feared, now silent and hollow-eyed. His reflection stared back at him from the black glass of his desk, and for once, he hated the man he saw. He could still feel Eli's warmth, the sound of his choked breath echoing in his ears. It hadn't been planned. It had been rage, grief, and something darker that he didn't dare name. He pressed his hand to his temple, veins tight with guilt. "What the hell have I done?" he muttered. He'd wanted revenge, not this. Not to see Eli's terrified eyes burned into his mind every time he closed his own. He should have felt triumphant. He'd finally destroyed the Crestfalls. But all Damien felt was an ache that wouldn't go away. His instincts as an alpha warred with the guilt in his chest, a poisonous mix of desire and remorse. He wanted to see Eli again, to make sure he was all right, to apologize, but he also knew Eli would never forgive him. Maybe he didn't deserve to be forgiven. Meanwhile, Eli dressed in silence, every movement sharp and trembling. He wrapped a scarf around his neck, hiding the mark, and avoided his own reflection. The air still carried Damien's scent, no matter where he went. It haunted him, like invisible chains around his heart. That night, Eli sat on the edge of his bed, whispering into the dark, "I'll never let him see me break, never again." But when he closed his eyes, the memory of that night, his breath, his touch, his voice, wouldn't leave him. And somewhere across the city, Damien poured himself another glass of whiskey, staring at the rain as it hit his office window. He told himself he'd move on, that this was over. But deep inside, a new kind of obsession had begun. One he couldn't control, and one that would pull them both into a storm neither could escape. Because no matter how far apart they were, the mark had already done its work. The alpha and the omega were now tied, by guilt, by scent, by something dangerously close to fate. Weeks had passed since the night that ruined everything, yet Eli still lived inside its shadow. He threw himself into silence, into routine, into pretending. But no matter how many scarves he wore or how many showers he took, Damien's scent lingered somewhere he couldn't reach. In the corners of his mind, in the rhythm of his heartbeat. He told himself he hated it, hated him, hated what that night had done to him. But the body didn't always obey the heart. It started with exhaustion. Then came fever. His hands trembled as he tried to steady a cup of tea, his pulse racing with no reason he could name. The air around him felt thick, heavy with something he couldn't explain. He opened windows, he paced, he blamed stress, yet none of it helped. By evening, his mind was foggy, his chest tight. Every noise seemed louder, every scent sharper, until one stood out above all others. A trace of spice and smoke, cold metal and rain, Damien. Eli's breath hitched. He pressed his hands over his mouth as panic clawed at his throat. "No, please, not this," he whispered. He reached for the small vial of suppressant drops on his nightstand, swallowing the bitter liquid. It should have dulled the pull, the unwanted reaction, but it didn't. It only left him dizzy, frightened, and furious. He slid to the floor, back against the wall, forcing himself to breathe. "I won't let him control me again," he muttered. Yet the mark on his neck seemed to pulse faintly, as if mocking him, proof of the bond that refused to fade. Across the city, Damien couldn't sleep. He'd been restless for nights without knowing why. His chest tightened with an ache he didn't understand, and the phantom echo of Eli's scent drifted through his memory like smoke. He tried to ignore it, tried to drown it in work and whiskey, but a strange pull kept tugging at his instincts, whispering that something was wrong. He rose from his desk, staring out at the city lights below, unaware that miles away, the same storm churned inside the heart of the one person he swore he'd stay away from. Neither of them knew it yet, but the bond that began in hate was awakening again. Stronger, deeper, and far more dangerous than before. Eli had been trying to live as if nothing had happened. He showed up for work, buried himself in numbers and contracts, and smiled when his colleagues asked if he was doing better. On the surface, he looked fine, polished, calm, untouchable. But inside, every day felt like walking through smoke. He hadn't been sleeping, his appetite had disappeared, and strange waves of dizziness came and went with no warning. That morning, the office lights seemed too bright. He pressed a hand to his temple and told himself he only needed air. He'd skipped breakfast again, that was all. But when the room tilted a second time and the floor rushed up to meet him, the last thing he heard was someone shouting his name. When he woke, the world smelled faintly of antiseptic and rain. The ceiling above him was pale blue, the hum of hospital machinery steady and soft. A nurse appeared, her smile careful. "You're awake," she said gently. "You fainted at work. We ran a few tests to make sure you're all right." Eli blinked, confused. "Tests?" The nurse hesitated. "The doctor will explain everything." A few minutes later, the door opened. Dr. Marin, a quiet man with kind eyes, stepped inside holding a chart. He looked at Eli for a long moment before speaking. "You've been under a lot of stress, haven't you?" Eli tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You could say that." The doctor set the chart down and took a breath. "Eli, one of the tests came back positive. You're expecting." For a second, the words didn't make sense. "Expecting?" He repeated them in his mind, and then they sank in like stones in deep water. His stomach turned to ice. "No," he whispered. "That's not possible." "I'm sorry," the doctor said softly. "It's early, but the signs are clear. You're healthy, but you'll need rest. You shouldn't be alone through this." Eli couldn't breathe. His hands shook as he gripped the edge of the blanket. The doctor's voice blurred into background noise. "Pregnant." The word echoed again and again, cruel and unreal. There was only one moment that could have led to this, one person. One mistake. He saw Damien's face in his mind. The cold eyes, the cruel mouth, the night that wouldn't stop haunting him. His pulse roared in his ears. No, can't be him. But it was. It had to be. He pressed a trembling hand over his mouth. Shame rose in his throat, hot and bitter. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. Not after what Damien had taken from him. The doctor was still talking, mentioning support groups, nutrition plans, options. Eli nodded at all the right times, but he didn't hear a word. All he could think was that the life inside him was proof of a bond he never wanted. When the doctor finally left, Eli sat there in silence. The hospital window showed a gray sky, rain just beginning to fall. He placed a hand on his stomach, barely daring to breathe. 100 emotions collided. Fear, anger, sorrow, confusion. And underneath them all, something quieter that he refused to name. Tears slipped down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. "You didn't ask for this?" he whispered to the small life he couldn't yet feel. "Neither did I." Then his jaw hardened. He couldn't let Damien know. If Damien found out, he'd claim control over this too. Over him, over the child, over everything. He wouldn't let that happen. Eli stood, still trembling, and looked at his reflection in the dark window. "He took my family," he said quietly. "He won't take this." And with that vow, he turned away from the hospital lights and stepped into the rain, determined to disappear before Damien ever learned what fate had done between them. The city was gray that morning, drenched in the kind of rain that blurred glass and erased sharp edges. Damien sat behind his office desk, eyes fixed on the endless stream of reports that meant nothing to him anymore. The numbers were perfect, profit soaring. He had everything he'd ever wanted. And yet, the silence in his chest wouldn't go away. He hadn't seen Eli in weeks. Not since that night. He told himself it was better that way. He'd done enough damage already. But sometimes, in the quiet hours, he still saw him. His trembling hands, his tearful eyes, the way he'd whispered, "Don't touch me," like a prayer. Damien would jolt awake, haunted by guilt he didn't know how to name. So when his secretary entered that morning, saying, "Sir, there's been a data breach from a local clinic," he barely looked up, until she added, "It involves someone connected to the Crestfall account." The name made his pulse skip. He reached for the file without a word. Inside, half-hidden under system logs, was a single medical report, confidential, flagged by error. His eyes skimmed down the lines, his brain barely registering the words until one tore the air from his lungs. Patient, Eli Crestfall. Status, pregnant. He read it twice, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something else. They didn't. The room seemed to shrink around him. The sound of the rain grew louder, crueler. His throat felt tight, his heart hammering so hard it hurt. "No," he whispered. "That can't be." But the timeline matched. The symptoms, the dates, all of it. His instincts, silent for weeks, suddenly roared awake. Sharp, possessive, relentless. Something deep and ancient inside him twisted violently at the thought of Eli carrying his child alone. The next thing he knew, he was out the door. The drive through the storm was a blur. Red lights, wet streets, the sound of his heartbeat pounding louder than the rain. He didn't even remember parking. He only remembered standing at Eli's apartment door, dripping, shaking, furious, and afraid in equal measure. When the door opened, Eli froze. He looked smaller somehow, paler, thinner, but his eyes were still fierce, burning with the same defiance that had drawn Damien in from the beginning. "What are you doing here?" Eli demanded, stepping back instinctively. Damien's voice came out rough, almost breaking. "You're pregnant." The color drained from Eli's face. He didn't answer, didn't move. Only his hand went to his stomach, protective, trembling. "So it's true," Damien said quietly, taking a step forward. "You were going to hide this from me? Don't," Eli snapped, his voice shaking. "Don't you dare talk to me like you care." "I do care," Damien said, louder this time. "Do you think I could forget you? Pretend that night didn't." "Stop it." Eli's voice cracked like thunder. He pressed a hand against his chest, as if holding himself together. "You already took everything from me. Isn't that enough?" The words hit Damien harder than a blade. For a moment he couldn't breathe. Eli's eyes were wet now, but he refused to cry. "You destroyed my family, my life, and now you show up because you suddenly feel guilty? You don't get to fix this, Damien. You don't get to claim anything." "I'm not trying to claim," he started, but the lie died in his throat. He was trying to claim. His instincts screamed for it, to protect, to provide, to make sure Eli and the child were safe. But the way Eli looked at him, like he was poison, shattered something inside. For a long moment, the only sound between them was the storm outside. Finally, Damien took a slow breath. "I can't undo what I did," he said, voice low, almost hoarse. "But I won't let you go through this alone." Eli looked away, his shoulders trembling. "You don't get to decide that. I already have." The finality in Damien's tone made Eli flinch. He turned away, biting his lip to stop it from trembling. He hated how powerless he felt whenever Damien was near, hated that his scent still made the air heavier, that his presence still stirred something he didn't want to feel. "Get out," Eli whispered, "before I hate you more than I already do." But Damien didn't move. His gaze softened, just slightly. "You can hate me all you want, Eli, but you're not alone anymore. Not while that child exists." And then, as lightning flashed across the window, Damien turned and walked out, leaving behind the echo of his promise and the storm that was only just beginning to break. Eli hadn't slept properly in days. Every creak of the floorboards, every knock on the door made his heart lurch. Since the confrontation, Damien hadn't called, hadn't visited, and that silence should have been a relief. But it wasn't. It felt like waiting for a storm that refused to end. He was at the small kitchen table, trying to eat something bland to calm the nausea, when a knock came, firm, precise. His stomach dropped. He opened the door and froze. Two men in black suits stood outside. "Mr. Crestfall," one said politely. "Mr. Vance sent us." Before Eli could speak, a third car pulled up. Sleek, dark, expensive. Damien stepped out, rain clinging to his coat, his expression unreadable, but his presence filling the hallway like a shadow. Eli's voice came out tight. "You have no right to send people to my home." "I warned you," Damien said, his tone low but controlled. "You're not safe here." Eli's jaw clenched. "Safe from what?" "You." A muscle in Damien's cheek twitched. "There are things you don't understand. That report wasn't just leaked. Someone leaked it on purpose. You've been targeted, Eli. And I won't let anyone. Don't pretend this is about me." Eli snapped. "You're doing this because of the child." Damien's eyes darkened, the alpha in him surfacing for a fraction of a second. "That child is mine. That makes both of you my responsibility." The words struck Eli like a cage snapping shut. "Responsibility?" he echoed bitterly. "You mean ownership." But Damien didn't argue. He just gave a quiet signal, and the guards began moving, efficiently, wordlessly, checking windows, scanning the street. It all happened so fast Eli could hardly breathe. "Stop!" he shouted, stepping in front of them. "You can't just. They're here for your protection." Damien cut in, voice sharp. "And you're coming with me. My house is secure. This place isn't." "I'm not going anywhere with you." Damien took one slow step forward. "Eli." His tone softened, but his gaze didn't waver. "You're carrying my child. If anything happens to you, then it's my problem." Eli cried, his voice breaking. "Not yours. You don't get to control my life because of a mistake." The word mistake made something flicker in Damien's expression. Something raw and wounded, gone as quickly as it came. He exhaled, long and heavy. "You can hate me all you want," he said quietly, "but I won't risk your life. Not again." And before Eli could protest further, the guards gently but firmly escorted him outside. The world blurred around him, the car doors closing, the hum of the engine, the rain streaking down tinted glass. He didn't look at Damien once. He refused to. His chest ached with fury and exhaustion, but beneath it all was a thread of something worse. Fear. Not of Damien, not exactly, but of the part of himself that didn't feel entirely safe away from him. When they arrived at the mansion, Eli's breath caught. The gates opened slowly, revealing sprawling gardens lit by golden lamps. The mansion stood like a fortress, grand, cold, perfect. "I'm not staying here," he muttered the moment he stepped out. "You are," Damien replied simply, "until I can guarantee your safety." Days turned into weeks, and the mansion, once a symbol of everything Eli despised, began to change. It wasn't home, not yet, but it was no longer the cold, echoing prison it had been when he first arrived. He told himself it was only because he was getting used to the silence, to the guards, to the vast rooms that smelled faintly of cedar and rain. But deep down, he knew the truth. The real reason was Damien. He saw it in the smallest things, the cracks forming in the armor Damien wore so perfectly. At breakfast, Eli would find the tea already steeped the way he liked, though he'd never said how. When the doctor came for checkups, Damien would stand nearby pretending not to care, but his jaw tightened whenever Eli winced. And at night, when Eli woke from dreams too painful to name, he would sometimes hear footsteps pacing outside his door, steady, rhythmic, and strangely comforting. He pretended not to notice, pretended he didn't care, pretended his heart didn't race every time he caught Damien's gaze across the dining table, something unreadable flickering there before it was quickly masked again. One evening, Eli was reading on the couch when he felt the soft hum of the mansion's generator kick in. The power had flickered twice already that night, the storm outside rolling in heavy waves of thunder and lightning. Damien entered the room, sleeves rolled up, his usual crisp composure a little frayed. "You should rest," Damien said quietly. "It's late." Eli didn't look up. "You don't get to tell me what to do." I'm not telling you, Damien replied, standing by the window. Just suggesting. Eli finally met his eyes. You're terrible at pretending you don't care. For the first time, Damien's expression faltered. And you're terrible at pretending you don't notice. The air between them tightened, neither daring to look away. Thunder cracked again, and for a moment, Eli saw it. The guilt buried beneath Damien's control. His eyes were darker than usual, rimmed with exhaustion. Why do you look at me like that? Eli asked quietly. Damien hesitated. Because I can't undo what I did. The admission hit harder than Eli expected. He opened his mouth to answer, but no words came. The man before him wasn't the ruthless alpha who destroyed his family's company. He wasn't even the man from that terrible night. He looked like someone carrying a weight too heavy to name. Eli turned away, his throat tight. You think guilt fixes anything? No, Damien said softly. But it's all I have left. The words hung in the air like a wound neither of them could touch. Later that night, Eli woke to the sound of muffled voices in the hall. He pushed the blanket aside and cracked the door open. Down the corridor, Damien was standing near the security monitors, speaking to one of the guards. His voice was low, sharp, but Eli caught fragments of it. Make sure he eats properly. No stress. I don't care what it costs. He's not to be disturbed. Eli's chest tightened. He closed the door before Damien could notice him. For a long moment, he leaned against it, eyes shut, breath unsteady. He wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier. Anger made sense. The days inside the mansion had settled into a strange rhythm. Quiet mornings, long afternoons, and nights that stretched endlessly between tension and peace. Eli still refused to admit that he'd grown used to it. To the gentle hum of the hall lamps, the distant sound of guards patrolling, and even to Damien's footsteps that echoed softly through the corridors at predictable hours. He told himself that it wasn't comfort, just survival. But lately, something had shifted. His body had begun to change more rapidly, his movements slower, his heartbeat always a little louder. Sometimes, when he rested his palm on his stomach, he swore he could feel a faint flutter beneath his skin, like whispers of life waiting to be heard. He didn't tell Damien. He didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing. That morning, Eli sat in the small conservatory at the back of the mansion. It was the only room that felt alive, filled with sunlight and potted plants that reached for the glass ceiling above. He had a book open on his lap, but he hadn't turned a page in half an hour. His thoughts were drifting, half in the present, half somewhere else entirely. Then it happened. A soft, quick movement beneath his ribs. So faint he thought he imagined it. He froze. His breath hitched. Then again, a gentle push from within, unmistakable this time. His heart stopped and raced all at once. For a moment, he could only stare down at his stomach, his fingers trembling. You, he whispered, barely audible. You're really there. His vision blurred. He laughed. A sound of disbelief and quiet joy. Then, behind him, a low voice spoke. Eli. He turned sharply. Damien stood in the doorway, a file in his hand, his usual composure breaking into confusion at the sight of Eli's tear-streaked face. What's wrong? Are you in pain? Eli shook his head quickly. No, He stopped, unable to explain. He moved, he whispered. Damien blinked, stepping closer. What? The baby. I felt him. He kicked. For a moment, Damien didn't speak. Then the file slipped from his hand, papers scattering across the marble floor. He crossed the room in 3 long strides and knelt beside Eli, his breath shallow. You did. Eli hesitated, startled by the sudden closeness. Yes, he said softly. Here. Without thinking, he took Damien's hand, large, warm, rough from years of work, and guided it to where the movement had been. The contact sent a strange, electric jolt through him. Damien's scent, clean, sharp, familiar, wrapped around him like a memory he didn't want to have. First, there was nothing. Then, a small flutter beneath their joined hands. Damien's eyes widened. His breath caught. I felt it. He's strong. Damien murmured. Just like you. Don't, Eli whispered, voice trembling. Don't say things like that. Damien looked up, his eyes dark with something unspoken. Why not? Because, Eli's breath faltered. Because it makes it harder to hate you. Silence fell between them, heavy, fragile, real. The rain outside began to fall softly against the glass, the world holding its breath. Damien didn't speak, didn't move. He just stayed there, hands still resting gently against Eli's stomach, as if afraid the life beneath his palm might disappear if he let go. Finally, Eli withdrew his hand, breaking the spell. You should go, he said quietly. Damien stood slowly, but not before whispering, almost to himself. He kicked because he knows his father's here. Eli turned away, tears stinging his eyes. You lost the right to call yourself that the night you ruined me. The words hit Damien like a blade. He didn't argue. He just nodded, his face unreadable again, though his eyes betrayed the hurt he didn't voice. As he walked away, Eli pressed a hand against his stomach once more. The baby kicked again, a small, insistent reminder of the bond he couldn't erase. And as the door closed behind Damien, Eli whispered through the ache in his chest. You shouldn't make me feel this way. Not after everything. But deep inside, where denial couldn't reach, his heart had already betrayed him. The night after the baby's first kick was strangely quiet. Eli couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Damien's face. The shock, the warmth, the quiet wonder when he'd felt their child move. It haunted him. He didn't want it to. He wanted to hate Damien, to hold onto that anger like armor. But something inside him was shifting, softening against his will. The next morning, curiosity got the better of him. He'd seen Damien leave early, heading toward the east wing, the one he never allowed anyone to enter. For weeks, Eli had wondered what secrets he kept there. Now, with the mansion silent, he followed. The door to Damien's private study was slightly ajar. Eli hesitated only a moment before slipping inside. The room was dimly lit, filled with shelves of old books, files, and a large portrait half hidden beneath a white cloth. Papers were scattered across the desk, but what caught Eli's attention was a photo frame turned face down. He picked it up and froze. It was Damien younger, smiling beside a man and woman who looked kind, proud, and in the background, a company sign that made Eli's blood run cold. His father's company. The realization hit him like a blow. He flipped through the documents on the desk. Old contracts, legal papers, handwritten notes. Some were stamped with his father's name. Others were letters of complaint, ignored appeals. All ending the same way. Bankruptcy, ruin, silence. He found a small envelope yellowed with time. Inside was a letter addressed to Damien's late father. Eli read it trembling. We regret to inform you that the board has decided to terminate your partnership. Your property and assets will be seized to repay outstanding debts. It was signed by Eli's father. A chill spread through him. His stomach turned. He had grown up hearing his father boast about winning ruthless business wars, never realizing that victory had come at the cost of someone's life, someone's family. He didn't hear Damien enter until it was too late. What are you doing here? His voice was low, dangerous. Eli spun around, guilt flashing across his face. The letter slipped from his hand. I wanted to understand, Eli whispered. All this time, I thought you destroyed my family for greed. But it wasn't greed, was it? Damien's jaw tightened. He said nothing, but his silence spoke louder than any denial. Eli took a shaky breath. My father, he ruined you, didn't he? Damien looked away, his expression cold. But beneath that coldness was something raw. Your father didn't just ruin me, he said finally. He destroyed my entire family. He took our company, our home. My mother died of illness because we couldn't afford her treatment anymore. My father, his voice faltered. He ended his life the night your father celebrated his greatest business victory. Eli's heart cracked. He couldn't breathe. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. Damien's tone was bitter. You were the golden son, protected, adored. I watched you smile in those glossy magazines while my family starved. Eli flinched, tears stinging his eyes. That doesn't make what you did right. No, Damien said quietly. It doesn't. But when I finally had the power to take back what was stolen, I did it. And when I saw you, his perfect heir, standing there, I wanted to hurt you the way your father hurt me. Eli looked at him, eyes glistening. Is that what that night was to you? Revenge. Damien's breath hitched. It was supposed to be, he whispered. But it wasn't. The silence between them was sharp as glass. Eli turned away, his hand instinctively resting over his stomach. You destroyed my life because of your pain, but now I see. We're both living in the wreckage our fathers left behind. Damien's gaze softened, something breaking in his chest. Eli, don't, Eli said, stepping back. If you say my name like that again, I won't be able to hate you anymore. For the first time, Damien had no words. He only stood there, a man stripped of all his masks. As Eli walked past him, the sound of his footsteps echoing through the quiet hall. When the door closed, Damien sank into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. The truth was out, and for the first time, revenge didn't feel like victory. Felt like loss. And somewhere deep inside him, something began to change. A dangerous, unfamiliar ache that felt far too much like love. The mansion had grown quiet again, but not peaceful. Ever since the truth about their fathers had surfaced, an invisible wall hung between Eli and Damien. Not of hatred anymore, but of something heavier. Guilt, confusion, unspoken feelings that neither dared to touch. Eli spent his days in the garden now, sitting beneath the old oak tree with a blanket over his knees and a book he rarely read. He found comfort in the baby's growing movements, in the soft rhythm of life that reminded him that not everything born from pain had to be ugly. But the peace didn't last. One stormy evening, Damien returned from a late business meeting, his expression grave. Eli was in the living room, half asleep on the couch, when he sensed something was wrong. Damien's usual control, that sharp, composed alpha presence, was cracking. What happened? Eli asked quietly. Damien hesitated before answering. Someone broke into one of my warehouses. Eli frowned. It's not uncommon for competitors. They didn't steal anything, Damien cut in. His voice was low, dangerous. They left a message. He handed Eli a folded sheet of paper, the edges wet from rain. Eli opened it and froze. Sins of the past never die. We'll take from you what you took from us. And beneath the words, a single photograph. Eli, taken secretly from outside the mansion gates, his hand resting protectively over his stomach. Eli's blood ran cold. They know about me? They know everything, Damien said grimly. Someone has been watching you, probably for weeks. Eli's heart pounded. Who would do this? Damien's eyes darkened. There are more families my father and yours destroyed, rivals who never forgave either of them. But this, he took a sharp breath. This isn't just business. It's personal. Before Eli could reply, the lights flickered. A loud crack echoed through the hallway, glass shattering. Damien moved instantly, his instincts flaring. Stay here, he ordered, his voice all alpha command. But Eli grabbed his arm. No, Damien. What if they're here for the baby? That one word, baby, changed everything in Damien's eyes. His coldness vanished, replaced by raw panic. He grabbed Eli's hand. Then we move together. Don't leave my side. The power went out. The mansion fell into darkness, lit only by flashes of lightning through the tall windows. Footsteps echoed. Fast, deliberate, from somewhere near the back entrance. Damien led Eli down the hall, every movement controlled, protective. He pressed him into a side room and whispered, Lock the door, no matter what you hear. I'm not hiding while you... Eli. Damien cupped his cheek, his tone soft but firm. You're not just mine to protect anymore. You're our future. Please. Eli's breath caught. The first time Damien had said ours like it truly meant something. Reluctantly, he nodded. Damien turned and disappeared into the darkness. Minutes passed like hours. Eli could hear muffled shouting, the slam of doors, the sound of bodies moving in the hall. Then silence, the kind that makes the air feel too heavy to breathe. The door creaked open suddenly, and Eli nearly screamed until he saw him. Damien stood there, chest heaving, one arm cut and bleeding slightly, but his eyes blazing. "It's over," he said, breathless. "They're gone. My men caught two, they were hired mercenaries." Eli rushed to him before he could stop himself. "You're bleeding." "It's nothing," Damien muttered. But when Eli grabbed his wrist to check the wound, Damien didn't pull away. His eyes softened. "You were terrified, weren't you?" The storm outside had calmed by morning, but the air in the mansion still trembled with what had happened. The scent of tension, adrenaline, and fear clung to the halls, and to them. Eli sat by the fireplace, wrapped in a blanket, staring into the flames. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Every time he blinked, he saw Damien standing in the rain. Blood on his arm, fire in his eyes. The image burned into his mind. When Damien entered the room, Eli didn't look up at first. He felt him before he saw him, that deep, grounding alpha presence that always seemed to fill the space around him. "You should be resting," Damien said quietly. Eli laughed weakly. "I should be doing a lot of things, like pretending my life isn't falling apart again." Damien stepped closer, his voice softer now. "It's not falling apart. I won't let it." Eli turned then, meeting his gaze. "You can't keep promising that." His tone was brittle, his heart aching. "You already destroyed one version of my life. You can't fix it just by saying you'll protect me now." Damien's expression flickered. Guilt, pain, something deeper. "I know," he said simply, "but I can try." Silence stretched between them, heavy with all the things they'd never said aloud. The fire crackled softly, painting warm light across Damien's face. Light that made him look too human, too vulnerable for the monster Eli had always wanted to see. Eli's voice broke the silence. "Last night, when you said you'd protect me, did you mean it?" Damien didn't hesitate. "Yes. Even if I never forgive you?" Damien's jaw tightened. Even then, something in Eli's chest twisted painfully. He wanted to hate him. Gods, he wanted to. But the sincerity in Damien's voice made it impossible. He looked away, tears threatening to fall. "You make it hard to remember why I should hate you." Damien took a slow step forward. "Then stop trying." Eli froze. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs. Damien's scent, warm, steady, intoxicating, surrounded him. The same scent that haunted him since that night months ago. The same one his body still reacted to, no matter how hard he tried to deny it. "Damien," Eli warned, though his voice came out softer than he meant it to. Damien stopped just inches away. His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed a stray lock of hair from Eli's face. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice trembling. Eli's breath caught. I can't." That was all it took. Damien leaned in slowly, as if afraid to break something sacred. The world around them disappeared. The fire, the mansion, the storm's lingering echo. When their lips met, it wasn't violent like before. It was gentle, trembling, full of all the pain, anger, and longing they'd buried for too long. Eli's fingers clutched at Damien's shirt. His heart raced. Every part of him screamed that it was wrong, that this was the man who had destroyed his life. But the warmth of the kiss silenced the noise. When they finally broke apart, Damien pressed his forehead against Eli's. His voice was barely a whisper. "I've tried to hate you too, but I can't." Eli's eyes glistened. "We shouldn't do this," he breathed. "I know," Damien said, his thumb brushing against Eli's cheek. "But it feels like we were always meant to." Eli's chest ached with 1,000 emotions. Grief, guilt, desire, tenderness. "You ruined me," he whispered, "and I'd spend the rest of my life making it right," Damien replied. "If you'll let me." The room was silent except for the sound of their breathing, uneven, fragile, real. Eli leaned back slightly, looking into his eyes. Then prove it, Damien. Protect me not because of guilt, but because you want to. Damien nodded once, his gaze fierce and full of something he couldn't hide anymore. I already am. Eli didn't answer, but when Damien pulled him gently into his arms, he didn't resist either. For the first time since that terrible night, he let himself rest. Not in safety, but in surrender. And as the fire burned low, two broken souls clung to each other. Enemies, lovers, and something in between, while the storm outside finally gave way to a quiet dawn. Morning came softly, pale sunlight filtering through the tall windows of the mansion, the world washed clean after the storm. Yet inside, the air still felt heavy, charged with the memory of what had happened the night before. Eli woke before Damien. He lay still for a moment, watching the alpha beside him. Damien wasn't the cold, sharp man who had once towered over him in the boardroom or glared at him across the wreckage of their family's feud. In sleep, he looked a human, vulnerable. His hand rested near Eli's stomach, as if unconsciously guarding the life that grew there. Eli's heart twisted. How did we get here? He should have pushed him away, should have kept the wall up. But something inside him, something warm and aching, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was what it felt like when hate began to die. When Damien stirred, his eyes found Eli immediately. You're awake, he murmured, voice still rough with sleep. Eli nodded silently, unsure what to say. Did you sleep well? Damien asked, his tone softer than Eli had ever heard it. Surprisingly, Eli said, considering last night. Damien sat up, running a hand through his hair. I meant what I said. Eli frowned. About what? About protecting you. Both of you. Not out of guilt, not because I feel I have to, but because I want to. His gaze was steady, unwavering. You and this child, you're not my punishment anymore, Eli. You're my reason. The words hit Eli harder than he expected. His throat tightened. You don't have to say that just because he faltered, unable to finish. Damien smiled faintly. You think I don't know what this means? What you mean? Eli looked away, flustered. You're confusing guilt with love. Maybe I was, Damien admitted. But last night proved something. When I saw those men come for you, something inside me broke. I realized I'd burn down the world to keep you safe, and that's not guilt, Eli. That's something I can't fight anymore. Eli swallowed hard, his chest aching with conflicting emotions. You say that now, but what happens when the world remembers who I am? When they remind you that I'm the son of the man who ruined your life? Damien reached out, his hand gentle beneath Eli's chin, tilting his face upward. Then I'll remind them that you're the man who saved mine. For a moment, Eli could only stare at him, at the sincerity, the quiet fire in his eyes. Damien wasn't the man he'd once been. The cold, vengeful alpha was gone. What stood before him now was someone rebuilt from pain, piece by piece. Eli's voice trembled. Why are you telling me all this? Because I want you to believe me, Damien said. And because I need you to know that no matter what comes next, you're not alone. You never will be again. Eli didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed Damien's hand over his belly, where the faintest flutter could already be felt. Then promise me something, he whispered. Promise me that this child will never grow up surrounded by hate the way we did. Damien's expression softened. I promise. Promise me you'll never let your revenge touch him, or me, again. I swear it, Damien said, his voice low, steady, absolute. I'll protect you both with everything I am. Eli searched his face for even a trace of doubt, but found none. For the first time, he believed him. A tear slid down Eli's cheek before he could stop it. Damien brushed it away with his thumb. You don't have to be strong all the time, he said gently. Eli let out a shaky laugh. If I stop, I'm afraid I'll fall apart. Then fall, Damien whispered. I'll be here to catch you. The words melted something deep inside him. Eli leaned forward until his forehead rested against Damien's chest, feeling the slow, steady rhythm of his heartbeat. The warmth of his scent, the solidity of his arms, the quiet certainty of his promise. It all wrapped around him like safety he hadn't known in years. For the first time, he didn't feel trapped in Damien's world. He felt protected in it. Outside, the sun climbed higher, spilling light through the windows and across the floor, as if even the house itself was beginning to heal. But as peace settled between them, Damien's phone buzzed on the table. He reached for it, glanced at the screen, and the calm on his face shattered. Eli looked up instantly. "What is it?" Damien's expression darkened, his voice turning cold once more. "The men from last night. They weren't acting alone." He looked at Eli, his eyes fierce again. "Someone bigger is behind this. Someone who wants to finish what our fathers started." Eli's heart sank. The fragile calm they'd built cracked like thin ice. "Then," Eli said quietly, his hands still on his stomach, "we fight this time together." Damien nodded, pulling him close once more. Together. And as the sun broke fully through the clouds, both of them knew the hardest part was yet to come. Not surviving the danger outside, but surviving the emotions growing between them inside. The peace that had barely begun to take root shattered in an instant. By the time afternoon came, Damien's mansion, once silent and guarded, had become a fortress. Security doubled, every gate locked, every window checked. But Eli could feel it, fear creeping into the walls. Damien stood by the window in his office, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was low, controlled, dangerous. "Find out who paid them. I want names, accounts, everything. I don't care how much it costs." When he hung up, Eli spoke softly from the doorway. "You're scaring them." "They should be scared," Damien replied without turning. "Someone sent killers after you, after our child. I won't rest until I find them." Eli crossed the room slowly. "You think it's business rivals, don't you?" "At first," Damien said. "But the more I dig, the less it feels like business. This is personal." Something about his tone made Eli's chest tighten. "Personal?" Damien finally turned to face him. His expression was grim. "The men we caught last night, they were hired through a shell company. That company was founded by someone who used to work for your father." Eli's breath caught. "One of my father's people?" Damien nodded. "His name's Victor Rains, head of security for your father's firm, until your father accused him of embezzlement and destroyed his life. I had him investigated years ago. He disappeared after your father's fall. But now," Damien's jaw clenched, "he's back, and he's coming after both of us." Eli felt a chill crawl down his spine. "He must blame me for what my father did." "Not just you," Damien said. "He blames our families. He's trying to erase us both, to finish what the past started." Eli gripped the edge of the desk, his pulse racing. "Damien, if he knows where I live." "He does." Damien cut in sharply, his eyes dark. "That's why you're not leaving this house until I deal with him." Eli frowned. "And what if he doesn't stop? What if this doesn't end?" Damien stepped closer, his presence radiating fierce protectiveness. "Then I'll end it myself." The words sent a shiver through Eli. There was no cruelty in Damien's voice, only a dangerous kind of devotion. He wasn't fighting for revenge anymore. He was fighting for them. But even as Damien spoke, something gnawed at Eli's chest. A feeling that this war between their families had roots deeper than either of them knew. That night, unable to sleep, Eli wandered down to Damien's office again. He wanted to understand, to see what Damien had found. The desk was littered with old papers, reports, and photos. Among them, one image caught his eye, a photograph of Damien's father and another man shaking hands. Eli frowned, heart skipping. He knew that man. It was his own father. But behind them, barely visible, stood a third figure, younger, sharp-eyed, with a cold smile. Eli picked up the photo and turned it over. A name was scrawled in faded ink. Victor Rains. The realization hit him like lightning. Victor wasn't just an employee. He was there from the beginning. Suddenly, the pieces clicked. The corruption, the betrayal, the fall of both families. Victor had played them all. And now he was back to finish what he'd started. Before Eli could think further, he heard a sound behind him, a soft creak of the floorboards. He turned sharply. "Eli," Damien said from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here." Eli held up the photo. "Damien, look at this. Victor was working with both our fathers. He's the one who started everything. This feud, it wasn't just revenge. It was manipulation." Damien's eyes narrowed as he took the photo. "If this is true, it means neither of us was ever the enemy," Eli finished, his voice trembling. For a long moment Damien said nothing. Then he placed the photo down carefully, his hand curling into a fist. "He used our hatred to destroy two families. And now he's trying to destroy what's left." Eli stepped closer, voice low but steady. "Then we end this together. No more running. No more secrets." Damien looked at him. Really looked, and something fierce, protective, and almost tender burned in his eyes. "Together," he said quietly. As they stood side by side in the flickering light of the study, the storm outside began again, soft thunder rolling through the night. But this time it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of a war they would fight not as enemies, but as something dangerously closer, as one. The rain hadn't stopped for 2 days. It came down in sheets against the glass, drumming like war drums, as if the sky itself warned them what was coming. Eli sat by the window, hands on his growing belly, watching Damien prepare for battle. He had never seen the Alpha like this, calm, sharp, but with a darkness in his eyes that spoke of violence barely contained. "Are you sure about this?" Eli asked quietly. "You're walking into his hands." Damien fastened his watch, glancing at Eli. "That's exactly the point." Eli frowned. "You're baiting him?" Damien gave a faint, grim smile. "Victor's not stupid. He won't come out unless he believes he's already won. So I'll let him think he has." Eli's voice trembled. "And what about me?" Damien's tone softened. "You'll stay here. My guards will." Eli stood abruptly, anger flashing in his eyes. "No, I'm done hiding, Damien. He came after me. He came after our child. You're not facing him alone." Damien hesitated, torn between fear and pride. For a moment, something vulnerable flickered in his gaze. Then he stepped closer and cupped Eli's cheek. "You're stronger than I thought," he murmured. "But if anything happens to you, Eli, I won't survive it." Eli's breath hitched. "Then don't make me watch you walk into a death trap." The silence between them was heavy, until a sharp knock echoed through the room. One of Damien's men entered, holding a phone. "Sir, we traced the signal. Victor's location just went active. An old factory at the edge of the city." Damien's expression hardened. "Good. Prepare the convoy." Eli caught his arm. "Damien." He turned to him, eyes filled with a kind of cold tenderness. "If I don't come back before dawn, promise me you'll protect our child." Eli's throat tightened. "Don't say that." But Damien just smiled faintly, the kind of smile that said he'd already accepted his fate. The factory was a skeleton of rust and shadows, its corridors echoing with the sound of dripping water. Damien walked through the darkness alone, every sense alert. Then came the voice, smooth, cruel, echoing from above. "I see the wolf still obeys his instincts." Damien raised his head. Victor Rains stood on the metal walkway above, a pistol glinting in his hand. "Victor," Damien said coldly, "you've been busy." Victor laughed. "Busy cleaning up the mess your fathers made. But you became everything I needed. The perfect monster, the perfect tool." "I'm no one's tool," Damien growled. "Then why did you destroy everything your father built just to prove you weren't like him?" Victor sneered. "You wanted revenge, same as me. The only difference is, I finished what you couldn't." "By killing innocent people?" Damien snapped. "By going after Eli?" Victor smirked. "Eli's father ruined me. Taking his son, and his heir is poetic justice. That was all it took." Damien lunged forward, but before he could strike, gunfire exploded. The air filled with smoke and chaos. Back at the mansion, Eli's phone buzzed. A live feed appeared. Victor's men had hacked the system. The screen showed Damien surrounded, wounded, bleeding but unyielding. Eli's heart stopped. Without thinking, he grabbed his coat and ran. "Sir, you can't go," a guard shouted. But Eli's eyes blazed with determination. "He's out there because of me. I'm not sitting here waiting for him to die." By the time Eli reached the factory, it was nearly dawn. The storm had broken, but fog hung low, thick and cold. Inside, the smell of blood and gunpowder filled the air. He found Damien collapsed against a pillar, blood seeping from his shoulder. "Damien!" Eli fell to his knees, tears spilling. Damien's eyes fluttered open. "Eli, why are you—" "Quiet," Eli whispered, pressing his hands to the wound. "You're going to be okay." A slow clap echoed from the shadows. Victor stepped out, holding a detonator. Touching, truly. But this ends here. All of it. Eli froze. "You'll die too if you set that off." Victor smiled coldly. "I already did years ago." Damien struggled to stand. "You'll never win, Victor." Victor raised the detonator. "I already have." Then a single shot rang out. Victor's expression twisted in surprise as he looked down. A bullet through his chest. Behind him stood one of Damien's men, gun trembling. The detonator fell, clattering harmlessly to the ground. Eli exhaled shakily, collapsing against Damien. "It's over." But Damien's voice was faint. "No, it's just beginning." Eli's hands trembled. "Stay with me, Damien. Please." Damien's bloodied hand rose to Eli's cheek. "If I die tonight, remember this. You were never my revenge. You were my redemption." Eli's tears fell onto Damien's hand. "Don't you dare die on me." Sirens wailed in the distance. Guards rushed in. The fog began to lift, and as the first rays of dawn broke through the shattered roof, Eli whispered the only truth he had left. "I won't let you go. Not now. Not ever." And for the first time, Damien's lips curved into something soft, fragile, human. Then his eyes closed. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and silence. Hours blurred into days as machines beeped softly beside Damien's still form. Bandages covered his shoulder and chest. The once fearsome Alpha now lay motionless, fragile in a way Eli had never seen. Eli hadn't left his side. His eyes were red, his clothes wrinkled, but his grip on Damien's hand never wavered. Every rise and fall of Damien's chest was a fragile miracle he clung to. "Do you hear me?" Eli whispered, his voice trembling. "You don't get to leave. Not after everything." He rested his head against the bed, tears slipping quietly down his face. The memories wouldn't stop. The anger, the misunderstandings, the night of ruin that started it all. Yet now, when he looked at Damien, none of that mattered. Because under all the pain, Eli had seen something real. Someone broken, just like him. Outside the glass, the doctor spoke softly. "He's stable but weak. The bullet missed his heart by an inch. He'll need rest. And someone who won't let him push himself too far." Eli managed a weary smile. "That I can do." When he returned to the room, sunlight spilled gently across the bed. Damien's fingers twitched, once, twice, before his eyes fluttered open. "Eli." His voice was rough, hoarse from days of silence. Eli gasped, gripping his hand tighter. "You're awake." Damien blinked slowly, as if the sight of Eli grounded him back to life. "You shouldn't have come to that factory," he murmured. Eli's eyes filled again. "And let you die alone? Never." For a long moment, they just looked at each other. No titles, no enemies, no walls. Just two souls who had both been bleeding far too long. Damien's gaze softened. "You saved me." Eli shook his head. "We saved each other." Damien's hand brushed Eli's cheek, weak but steady. "I thought revenge would fix me, but it only chained me tighter. You broke those chains." Eli leaned into his touch, whispering, "Then maybe it's time we stop fighting ghosts." Outside, the world moved on. But in that small room, time stood still. Weeks passed. The mansion felt different now, lighter, warmer. The guards were gone. The business war ended, and Victor's empire crumbled to dust. One morning, Eli walked into Damien's study, holding a small, framed photograph of the ultrasound. "He's growing fast," Eli said with a shy smile. "The doctor says everything's normal." Damien looked up from his papers, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "You're glowing." Eli blushed. "Don't say it like that." Damien stood, walking around the desk to stand behind him. He placed a hand gently over Eli's stomach. "I never thought I'd have this. A home, a family, something worth protecting." Eli turned slightly, meeting his eyes. "Then protect it, Damien. Not out of guilt, out of love." For the first time, Damien didn't flinch at the word. He just nodded, quietly, reverently, as if accepting something sacred. That night, they sat together on the balcony. The city lights shimmered below, a quiet symphony of new beginnings. Eli rested his head on Damien's shoulder. "Do you think we can really move on from what we were?" Damien's arm wrapped around him, steady and sure. "Maybe we don't have to forget it," he said softly. "Maybe we just make something better out of it." Eli smiled faintly. "From hate to something better." Damien's voice dropped to a whisper. "To love." The night breeze carried their words into the dark. A promise, fragile but true. And as the first kick stirred within Eli again, he realized that the past no longer defined them. Because sometimes, redemption isn't found in forgiveness. It's found in choosing to stay, even when everything tells you to run.